Welcome to Unlearning with Laura, the podcast where you get to rewire your mind, reclaim your power, and break generational cycles. I'm Laura Stiles, clinical hypnotherapist and mindset coach, and founder of The Mindful Generation, the place where parents come to transform their lives and live with more purpose and freedom. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Mother Cup of Tea, a gorgeous range of herbal blends designed to support women's hormone health, energy and well-being. Honestly, they are like a hug in a cup. You can grab your 25% off of their wellness collection using the discount link in the show notes and use the code MINDFUL25. In the words of my youngest,
Yeah, we all love tea.
How cute was that? Before we dive into this episode, just a gentle reminder, if you are enjoying this podcast, please hit follow, like, subscribe or share it with a friend. It makes such a huge difference for a small business owner like me, and it really helps this podcast to reach more mums who need it. Hello, how are you all? I hope everyone is doing well. It feels quite strange recording this because I've had a full 2 weeks off of recording and not using my microphone for any audios or hypnosis or the podcast, and so it's really strange being back here again with my microphone. But I had a lovely holiday. I went to Cyprus, 10 days away with my family and my in-laws as well, which was really, really great. I get along really well with my in-laws, and it's always nice to have an extra pair of hands. But it did get me thinking about ideas for this episode. It's going to be a short solo episode. I'm full of cold. Typical that you get back from a lovely sunny break and then instantly get all the germs and feel like you're poorly. But I wanted to talk about the struggles and challenges and complications that come with having grandparents around, whether they're around for a dinner, like a Christmas dinner or a family event or on holiday with you. It can sometimes feel like a struggle. Sometimes the dynamic can get complicated, and we often fall back into our old patterns of how we would behave when we were a child if we're with our own parents. That can be a subconscious kind of behaviour that we're not very aware of, and it can cause friction. Now, as I said, I get along really well with my in-laws. They came away with us and it was wonderful, but it always comes with a little bit of, not conflict, that's not the right word. There's probably a bit of confusion sometimes in the way that we parent and the way that, you know, the older generation do things differently. So I want to talk a little bit about grandparents or in-laws and how we navigate those challenging events or holidays with them, and how we can either set boundaries or learn to accept, or maybe prompts we can use that will help us in those parenting situations. So I want to start by just rewinding all the way back to when I was a new mother and how I actually struggled with finding my voice when it came to knowing what was best for my baby. I had this real kind of lioness energy, as we all do when we're a new mum. You know what's best for your baby. You have that kind of sixth sense as to how to respond to them. And sometimes that can be quite hard for some people, and you can't access that in the beginning for various reasons. But for me, it was very much there. And I found it really quite hard in the very beginning when people did come to visit, not just grandparents, anyone, because I really wanted to just have my baby all to myself. I didn't want to share him. I didn't want to, and I don't mean that as in like I was, I wasn't being harsh. I wasn't being like, oh no, you can't cuddle. I would, allow people to cuddle him, and people were really great. People around me were fantastic. They didn't kind of force it, or they wouldn't really ask, which was wonderful because I thought everyone navigated it really well. So it was kind of up to me to say, hey, would you like a cuddle with him? And I think it could be really hard in the very beginning to know how to express how you're feeling when it comes to that overwhelming sensation of protection and love for your baby. And I am very much aware that this isn't the same for all mums. I know that if you don't have that bond in the beginning, that's tough and also very valid and also not abnormal. I struggled with when parents came round, and if they did say, hey, do you want us to take the baby out for a bit so you can get some rest? I loved that invitation was there, but I hated the fact that I didn't want to be away from the baby. And so I think that's totally natural, but it was really hard when I had my second baby. The birth was really quick. It went really smoothly. It was the complete opposite to when I had my first. But that day, I had a 20-minute labour from start to finish. We got to the hospital. Within 20 minutes, he was born, and we were home a couple of hours later. And that day, my in-laws said, let's take your older one and the baby to the park, and you can get some rest. And I said, well, I'll come too. I didn't want the baby to be taken away from me. I've just given birth to him. Oh my God. I can still feel the emotion now of how I desperately did not want them to take him. And so I just walked with them. But I could have done with that rest. I really could have done with. But I knew that I wouldn't be able to sleep or rest because I would have just been like, I want to be with my baby. And so that's that feeling, isn't it? It's a visceral feeling where you just don't want to be separated. And I went for a walk with them to the park, and then I said, I want, it got to the stage where I was like, the older kid, he was 2.5 at the time, please let Freddie just play, and I'm going to take George back because I actually really just want to go and rest with him on me. He needs to be with me. He's a newborn. So, things like that where it's really hard to be brave and to express how we're actually feeling, especially when our hormones are all over the shop. We don't want to upset. We're conditioned to be people pleasers. We don't want to feel like we're being judged. And I especially didn't want any conflict to be caused and for anyone to be thinking, oh, well don't worry, we'll be fine. You just rest. We've got this. It wasn't that. It was that I just needed to have him with me. He's just been inside my body for the last 9 months. We still need to be together. So I wanted to start there because that was my first kind of instinct of that lioness feeling of the baby needs to be with me. I'm an attachment parent. I feel the love viscerally and I need to be with them. And I felt that with both of them. So boundaries is where it begins. And that means expressing our needs. But it's really hard to do that in a way that feels healthy and polite, I guess, when you're full of hormones and where anything can set you off crying and that kind of thing, which happened to me a lot in the early days. So it's a vital skill that I guess we learn when we become a mother. And I definitely felt this for myself. I learned boundaries when I became a mother. I didn't really have great boundaries in place prior to that, I don't think. And as the years have gone by, I've got better and better at implementing stronger and stronger boundaries. Now, when I speak to my clients about this sort of thing, I coach them through it because it can feel so hard. As I said, if you're a natural people pleaser, you don't want to upset people. It can be really hard to implement those and to feel like you're not upsetting someone. Some of my clients have actually said that becoming a mother, it allowed them to, for the very first time in their life, set a boundary with their own mother or their own father. And it kind of gave them this limit-setting mode that they could lean into that they'd never had before, and that felt really uncomfortable in the beginning, and then it felt empowering the more that they did it. So it's definitely the case for a lot of new mums that becoming a mum is the beginning of learning to set boundaries and meeting your own needs for the first time perhaps. And it's a state that works for me in my relationships, and putting those boundaries in place was amazing because you realise, the world keeps spinning and I'm not a horrible person and people probably aren't judging me. And if they are, I actually don't care because the most important thing that I care about right now is keeping my baby alive and having this secure attachment with my baby. And so it gives you back more time and energy once you put those boundaries in place. As I'm talking, I'm remembering I'll just give you another example of a situation when my firstborn was about 4 or 5 months old. He was still I think we were still using the pram because I remember it being quite an awkward day out. So me and my husband went to visit my mum in Devon, and we went to this really lovely kind of old National Trust place. What was it called? Colton Fish Acre? Yeah, that was it. Really beautiful, like tropical gardens right on the coast. Nice cafe, all of that. But my eldest was having a really bad day. He just kept crying, and he was a cryy baby anyway. We struggled with like tongue tie and feeding, wind and lots of, colic and that kind of thing when he was really little. I had to feed around the clock every kind of 90 minutes. It was very exhausting. And this particular trip was a nice trip in general, but that one day was super stressful. When they're crying constantly, everyone wants to help. Everyone wants to be a fixer, don't they? You want to just get to the crux of the problem and fix it. But none of us could figure out why he was so upset. He didn't want to be in the pram, so we were carrying him, but the terrain was quite hilly, so we would take it in turns to carry. And my mum often just wants to fix things, as mums do. But sometimes it's really helpful when they sort of leave you to it and let you figure it out on your own. And I remember her saying, can I take him? Can I try and settle him? And me being me was very much like, no, it's fine. And I was exhausted as well, so tired all the time. And yeah, I think a few times she was trying to suggest things. And I was saying, we've tried that and this is not helping. And I sort of just wanted her to like step away for a few minutes and let us figure it out. That didn't happen. And I ended up snapping at her. And it's really awkward because you don't want to cause friction, and you don't want it to be awkward. My husband's there and I don't want any arguments, but I just kind of needed that peace and space to be able to figure it out. And that's one thing that my mother-in-law is really good at, actually. Like last week, my youngest was having a massive meltdown and she literally stepped out the house for a few minutes. I was like, this is really helpful because I can kind of cope with this without those prying eyes. But no, my mum really wants to be a fixer and it was tricky. Eventually, he was fine. We stopped for lunch. He was fine, and he had a massive poo, like poonami, and he was fine after that. So obviously, he was feeling uncomfortable with wind and being sort of bunged up down there. But I remember it just being really awkward because I'd snapped at her a few times, and she was trying to help, and I was like, I just kind of want to figure this out on my own. And I'd become really overstimulated by the crying and by everyone trying to suggest things, and I sort of wanted to be able to. And like maybe it was the kind of fear of judgment. Maybe I was thinking I should know the answer. I should know how to fix this crying. And I think a lot of mums feel like that. So yeah, that's another example of sort of not really knowing what to say in the moment and handling it in quite a bad way because I think I was just unkind to her and then I apologised afterwards. If you do have a baby and you are finding it really hard to implement boundaries, or maybe you're just not in the headspace because you're so exhausted and you've got baby brain and you don't even know how to navigate or think about this stuff, a really great phrase you can use in the moment, which helped me a lot when I was a new mum, and Zoe Blaskey came up with this. She is the host of the Motherkind podcast, which really helped me a few years ago, and that is simple phrase: thanks for the advice, but I'm enjoying finding my own way in motherhood. You can use that for so many different things. And it's a really helpful one because sometimes people really are just wanting to help. Most of the time, our parents, we're still their babies and they just mean well, don't they? They mean well, they want to help. But we're parenting in different times. We know a lot more about the nervous system, the brain, child development. Punishment is different. We don't lean into that authoritarian punishment in the way that they did. And so it can be really tricky when they become toddlers with that side of things. But that is definitely something I used when mine were younger. And you can also find the empowerment to say things like, we're doing sleep in our own way. It feels right for us to do it this way. It might change, but right now I'd be really grateful if you could support us in this decision. If you're co-sleeping, you're allowed to say to them, look, we're doing it this way. Please support us. And things like, what I really need is practical support. I don't need advice. What would really help is if you could do the washing up downstairs. Thank you so much. It's just finding the courage to seek out the support that you really need in that moment. So you get to choose how you want to parent your children. You're bringing them into the world. And this is just your reminder to say what you need to say when it needs to be said. And it can be a struggle with things like sugar intake, presents for Christmas and birthdays. And of course, the big one, which I think a lot of people might struggle with, is beliefs on punishment and discipline. If you've got a grandparent that wants to send your child to their room or put them on timeout and you don't believe in it, then have that conversation. You can say, we're choosing not to do the naughty step or timeouts. And this is based on neuroscience and studies in child development. Please, can you follow our rules and do this instead? This is how we're going to do it. I'd really appreciate it if you could do the same so that it feels aligned. Just finding the courage to have that voice and explain how you're doing things. And most of the time they take it really well and fully understand. One thing I've noticed about setting boundaries with family members is that being more honest about my needs has improved relationships because it removes the resentment. And I have found myself feeling so frustrated in the past with things like if my mum phones me at the wrong time, or if she says something that I feel like she shouldn't have said in front of the children, or whatever. I've found it quite hard. But then when I'm honest and explain things in a kind and compassionate way, it actually opens up quite an interesting conversation most of the time. And sometimes she'll open up about when we were little kids and when we were babies and how she felt and how different it was. And it can be a really fascinating chat. So I think it's always helpful when you're in the right headspace to just be honest and set boundaries where it's needed, because at the end of the day, you deserve to be honest about what works for you, and so do the people around you. So it's just a really good sign of how invested you are in the relationship with your parents. And although it can feel uncomfortable, after the discomfort, good things come out of it. So I hope that helps. I actually had way more examples of things that I wanted to talk about from when my mum frustrated me when I was a newish mum and when the kids were toddlers. But actually, I think I've covered enough examples. And it's a quick episode, like I said, so I won't keep badgering on. Also, I think she listens to this, so I don't want to upset her. But I think just remember that when you really want to set a boundary, a sure sign that you actually need to set that boundary is when you feel annoyed or resentful or really frustrated. And if you're feeling that kind of anger feeling bubbling up, that's when something needs to be addressed. So I think that's a good reminder. Final thoughts from me: if you work for a company that have a wellbeing initiative or any kind of HR budget where they can support parents, please do get in touch if you feel like they could benefit from some parental coaching, like one-to-one coaching for those of you who may be transitioning back from maternity leave or paternity leave, or whether you just feel like you need to reach some goals, or you're feeling a bit lost, or need some help with an identity shift or anything like that. If your company has a budget for it, then that's what I do in my work. I've had a few really fantastic corporate clients this week where I've delivered webinars all about managing the juggle and the challenges of the mental load. And it's been really fun. So if your company would benefit from this and there's like a parents network perhaps, do reach out to your people leader and see if they might want to invest in a 1-hour session, like a really informative and valuable webinar where you get to keep resources afterwards. So I've loved delivering those recently, and I've got a few more coming up, which is really exciting. And I also have one space available for my 4-week program, the 4-week awakening. If you'd like to find out some more details about that, check out my website, mindful-generation.com, where you can find all the details. Thank you for listening and see you next time. Bye.